Alright guys, it's the Bald Man here, and we're going to be looking at this FRQ, and this deals with the new reserve market graph, so it'll be a good opportunity for us to practice this. Okay, it says assume the economy of Iceland is operating below full employment. What does that mean? We are in a recession. So it says draw a correctly labeled long-run aggregate supply, short-run aggregate supply, aggregate demand, and show each of the following: current equilibrium and output price level labeled Y1 PL1 and full employment output labeled as YF. Okay, so we can do this. It's rather easy. So LRAS. Oh, I was about to make my first mistake there, right? So we're in a recession, and we need to graph it as such. So they told me to use YF, so that is what I'm going to use, and also Y1 and PL1, which is exactly what I'm doing here. All right, so that takes care of A. Then B says, assume the banking system in Iceland has ample reserves and that the central bank targets a new policy rate to reach full employment. Should the central bank increase or decrease its administered interest rates? All right, so the administered interest rates, guys, that's just another way of saying interest on reserves, which we remember, if we remember, is going to be the interest rate that the Fed pays banks for letting the Fed hold their money for them. All right, so if we are in a recession and the Fed wants to encourage more economic activity, it's going to decrease the interest on reserves that they're paying out. Why would they do this? So banks will be encouraged to take their money out of the Fed, put them in their own vaults, lower their interest rates so they can now lend that money out. All right, so C says, given the central bank action you identified in Part B, draw a correctly labeled graph of the reserve market and show the effect on the policy rate. Okay, we can do this also. We just learned this graph, right? So policy rate, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, and let's go up to 6%, right? And over here we have the quantity of reserves. This is the demand of the reserves and the supply of the reserves. So we said that the Fed was going to be paying a lower interest on reserves to encourage more economic activity. How are we going to show it on this graph? Well, rather easily. We are just going to change our demand, shift our demand curve lower so we can see here that the Fed is now paying lower interest rates on the reserves that banks have them holding for them. So banks are encouraged to take this money out and lend it so they can earn a bigger profit on their own. All right, so that is C. D says the policymakers pursue a fiscal policy rather than monetary policy in Part B. Assume that the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8 and the value of the recessionary gap is 300 billion. 1. If the government changes its spending without changing taxes to eliminate the recessionary gap, calculate the minimum required change in government spending. All right, so that is going to be D1. They said our MPC is 0.8. Our spending multiplier is 1 over MPS. So that means MPS has to be 0.2. Why? 0.2 plus 0.8 will give me 1, and that is what you get when you add MPC plus MPS. It should equal 1, so that's how I know it's 0.2. Now, we don't like decimals inside fractions, and I do know that 20% is 1/5, so that means my multiplier is going to be 5. I have a gap of 300 billion. So I'm going to divide that by 5 and I'm going to get 60. But that's not the answer, guys, because the answer is increase government spending by $60 billion. That would be the correct answer for D1. Now D2 asks us if the government changes taxes without changing government spending to eliminate the recessionary gap, will the minimum required change in taxes be greater than, smaller than, or equal to the minimum change in government spending? And part D1, explain. All right, so if they cut taxes instead of spending, they're going to have to cut taxes by more than 60 billion, right? So the answer is it'll be greater than, but that's only part of the answer, right? Because they ask us to explain. So it's going to be greater than $60 billion because the tax multiplier is weaker than the spending multiplier. All right, guys, so if you have any questions about any of this, how it all worked, if you didn't understand how I did something, please drop a comment down below or send me a message on Remind, and I'll be glad to answer your questions.